Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So last week our topic was, and we stopped briefly on the topic of yoga and what is yoga. And we concluded that by Shri Krishna answering the definition of yoga in two phrases, and that is samatvam yoga uchyate, and that is evenness of mind is called yoga. That means that a mind that is tranquil of the disturbances caused by our tendencies, our conditionings, is one that is tranquil. That one is established in yoga, and can only that one be established in yoga because there are no disturbances causing the ripples in the mind, carrying the self-inquiry away, making it nearly impossible to self-inquire. That is why we need a pure, crystal, clean, tranquil mind. And then the second definition of yoga is yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is skill in action. And this is where we stopped last week to answer what does this word skill mean. Now before we go there into the word skill, we also talked about how do we know when one has attained yoga? What is the qualifier? And then we said that in a simple verse, Shruti vipratipanate yadastasyati nishchala samatha vachala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. When your intellect, though perplexed by what you have heard, shall stand immovable and steady in the self, then you shall attain self-realization. What that means, in other words to translate, is when your intellect is confronted by the perplexing statements and the mystical statements contained in the scriptures, you still remain completely unmoved, unwavering by the knowledge contained in these scriptures. Why? Because you're so firmly established in the knowledge as the self, whereby nothing can move you from your center. That's what we're saying, being established in yoga. Okay. Now, let's get back to Karma Yoga, which is now an introduction, chapter 2, of what is Karma Yoga and how to apply it. And we stopped last week at when Krishna said to Arjuna, Tasmad Yogaya Yujaswa. That means, oh Arjuna, engage in Karma Yoga, but for the sake of spiritual growth. That means engage in life, still continue doing everything you're already performing or acting out, but with a different twist, with a different attitude. So now let's talk about what that attitude is and how to go about it with a very simple example. Okay, now we stopped here and said yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is skill in action. So what does the word skill mean? We said first of all, skill does not mean its caliber. Because think about it, Arjuna was on the battlefield, standing between the Kauravas, the good guys, and the Pandavas, the Kauravas, the bad guys, and the Pandavas, the good guys. Arjuna is the best archer on the Kurukshetra field, so he does not need skill in action. Krishna will not say, go and fight skillfully, because Arjuna is already skillful. So he's got to be referring to something else. What Krishna is referring to in this statement is be intentional. So now we're going to talk about how to be intentional and an example of being intentional in life with this attitude of Karma Yoga. What is being intentional? Let's describe. And we're going to answer that by starting about what intentional is not, with a negative. Now think about it this way. What is most of our life run by? It's run by what's called unconscious competence. That means I'm unconsciously playing back the program which I've done in the past, and so it's natural for me to continue doing it in the future. That's called unconscious competence, autopilot, mechanical. Now, there are certain things that require mechanical thinking, but when it comes to moksha, that mechanical thinking has to be jolted. You have to snap out of that, because those mechanical thinkings are part of our vasanas. Vasanas are our conditionings which cause us to do what we have done in the past but do not serve us. If they really were serving us, you would not be here. Your life would be working 24/7. So obviously, we have to break out of these vasanas. Okay, so we're going to use an example of something that we all do, and that is driving a car. You probably got here with a car. Now, think about driving a car. How do most of us drive a car? We learn to drive a car, but we drive a car mechanically, don't we? We get in the car and we go from A to B, and we get to B, and that's all there is to it. In other words, you certainly have accomplished your purpose. You have gotten to where you need to be. But what do we say about moksha? It requires 24/7 effort. So why not use something like driving a car to apply that activity for the sake of self-realization? That is purifying the mind. That's what karma yoga's purpose is. Purifying the mind. Why? Because by purifying the mind, only then can the seeds of self-knowledge take fruit and harvest and blossom. Without a purity of the mind, that is a mind full of ripples, those seeds will not blossom. Clear? Okay. So now, let's investigate further what intentional means. Intentional means, a very nice definition from the dictionary is having external reference. That's what intentional means. Now the question is, having external reference to what? The answer is having external reference to something that is important to you. So that, therefore, if your intention or your goal in life is moksha, self-realization, then that external reference will be different to somebody else's who's getting for the sake of visiting their friends and having a good time. So that means having external reference to the goal of self-realization or moksha. In other words, it's mindful or awareness of your action. And it's deliberate. Okay. So that means we can drive our car deliberately. That's what we're concluding now. You think that's all there is to this. Okay, so I'm just going to be deliberate and mindful. Okay, so let's all get into the car and drive a car at 180, 200 kilometers an hour. I am being fully intentional and deliberate. I'm certainly snapping out of my unconscious competence, aren't I? Because to drive a car that fast, you have to really be sharp, don't you? So it doesn't stop there. There is more to deliberate action. So now let's investigate what that is. Number two, what the word skill means is consider the consequences of others in reference to my actions, my deliberate actions. So that means if I am driving a car at 180 kilometers an hour, will that likely impact other drivers positively or negatively? It's dangerous driving, isn't it? When you're just driving in a very nice way on the highway, suddenly someone just zooms right past you. It sort of invokes a sense of fear, a little bit of caution. So that means that skill in action means not only driving a car deliberately, mindfully, but also is my thinking, how is this driving affecting others? Now the question is, why would you want to think like this? What did we say last week? God is everywhere. Everyone is an expression of the divine. There is no place where God is not. So now, if everyone is me, God, everywhere, then how does it make sense to drive carelessly and hurt God, who I am? In other words, I am hurting myself. You see the logic there? So that means that not only is considering the consequences of others involved in being intentional, but also are others being influenced by my behavior. And this is the highest quality a human being can practice. It's called compassion. That is having feelings, being sensitive about others. How are others responding to my actions, and could my actions be done in such a way as to promote love versus promote fear in other people? Okay. So that means that others are affected by your behavior, who are also divine beings just like yourself. And the question is, has my behavior caused others to suffer? Think about that. We drive the car every day mechanically. Could we find a way to drive the car now by being aware of those on the road and just giving a thought or two, how is my behavior affecting others? Think about that. Why would I want to do that? Because not only have I now gotten from my house to work, but also by practicing a spiritual sadhana, by thinking about others, I have just purified my mind. That means I've done two things at once. Instead of just going to work, I have done a spiritual sadhana and I feel good that I've thought about others and I've practiced compassion. I've thought and I've included Ishvara into my mind. Okay? So, the opposite of considering consequences is a lack of, in other words, compassion or sensitivity for others. And this also happens in relationships all the time, is that either the man or the woman will be insensitive to the other's feelings, and that is as good as saying, I am cutting others down. I am cutting myself down. You understand? Okay. And no, let's not think that they can handle it, because, you know, when people are having a bad day, what do they usually do? Do they express their sense of misery, or do they hide it? They hide it. So let's not assume that they can handle it. No, they can't handle it, because just imagine a person coming back from work, their day hasn't gone very well, and suddenly on top of that, they're going back to a nice dinner that their wife has made, and then suddenly someone zooms right past 180 kilometers or cuts them off, and then just adds onto their misery. It doesn't work like that when exercising compassion, the highest quality of a human being. Okay, so other examples of karma yoga is, think about if you go to a meditation room. We've all been to a meditation, and what happens usually is people will move around. Yeah? So there's someone meditating, they're having a very quiet time, and someone else is completely unaware of the environment, and they're just moving around, you know, they're shaking, they're checking their phone with a bright light, probably being noticed by everyone else, even though their eyes are closed. So what does that mean? That's a lack of compassion, a lack of exercising what's called skill in action. You see? And also one other example is we can practice this with family, because it's very easy to be sensitive and exercise compassion for other people, but when it comes time for our own family, then we assume they can handle it because they're my family. They've got to deal with it. No, they are a divine expression, no different than anyone else. In other words, family gets no less or more merit than anyone else, because it is just God, Ishvara too, expressing itself in another form. So, let's summarize this with logic. Simple 3-step logic. Ask, what is my purpose or intent in the context of driving? If it's to work, well, you will get to work, no problem, just like any other day. If it's for spiritual growth, then I consider others and I drive, exercising compassion by thinking about other people. And then that leads to not only safely arriving to work, but also to a purified mind. So the purpose of karma yoga is for the busy Westerners or the busy Easterners or the busy minds who are constantly on the move. Because today we don't have time to necessarily sit down and perform a puja or a worship or a prayer or devotion or gratitude. So that means you can be constantly engage in spiritual sadhana by doing something like brushing your teeth, as Georgia has made last time the point, or simply like visiting your family, like looking at my mom or dad and thinking or imagining, well, this is a divine being. So I appreciate my mom and dad instead of, oh, they're just my mom and dad, so let's just treat them on autopilot. Yeah. All right, so now let's find out how to fail in life. Does anyone want to know how to fail in life? Why not? If you find out, then you just do you don't do what's recommended. Okay, step 1. Pursue Dharma. We have established what Dharma is: values, virtues, morals, just being a good person, having responsibilities. Pursue Artha, that is wealth and security. And pursue this little nice man here, pleasure, just the good things of life. Now, I didn't say anything's wrong nor right with Dharma, Artha, and Kama. I just said step 1 is pursue Dharma, Artha, and Kama. Step 2, put 100% of your life into step 1. And step 3, refer to step 2. So, in other words, step 3 question is, what happened to moksha? What do we say about moksha here? The highest attainment for humanity, which requires 24/7 effort. How? By having an intentional life that is a goal. And how to do that? We just use an example of using something that you do every day to remind yourself, like driving, that beings, divine beings, God is everywhere. Therefore, exercising my compassion and performing my spiritual sadhana wherever and whenever I go. Okay? Any questions so far about Karma Yoga before we move on to the next topic? Or how to apply this, or any more examples or anything like that?
I'm interested in moksha in terms of how people might approach it, because you can devote your life and seemingly not get anywhere. So is it like is it like that in the next life it's like carryover champion?
It's a carryover. It's a carryover.
You inherit those qualities that you have developed.
Yeah.
So nothing is wasted.
Nothing's wasted. We're going to get to a verse that Arjuna is worried, and obviously Krishna is giving Arjuna a lot of advice as to how to, quote, remove ignorance. And Arjuna is worried, well, now, what if I practice this sadhana, this karma yoga, and nothing happens? What if I die, still haven't got it? If I still haven't realized my nature? Then Krishna reassures Arjuna and says, don't worry, because all of this effort will carry over onto the next part. Think about, for example, when somebody is born, why do they immediately have a genius habit for, or just they can play the piano? Huh? Why? And their brother just completely is not, or their sister is not into music. Why do we get born and we have these abilities that are just, and we just become geniuses? Like, look at Mozart. Why is Mozart born in a family whose father himself was a great musician? You think that's an accident? No. In other words, Ishvara gives you the right situation, the right environment, and the right parents according to what? According to your, quote, past vasanas. Similarly, Gareth, with your question, by learning, that is knowledge, self-knowledge, that carries over to the next life, and then the next life it becomes so much easier. Why do you think that some of us are born in families of Brahmins? Families who are extremely religious and extremely knowledgeable about the reality. Why do you think that is? Because of the deeds collected from the past life, and therefore Ishvara has put you in the right situation to make it, to continue your journey. You see? So no effort is wasted. Okay.
Now, so your dharma is
Who?
The dharma.
Brahma?
Dharma. Your
Dharma.
duties.
Dharma, yeah?
Yeah. So normally that would be your job or things, your responsibilities.
Yeah, that's called swadharma.
So, okay.
Yeah, that is your personal duties, your personal responsibilities. Yeah.
So your duty to moksha is to be the best person you can.
Yes. In the level of mithya. While pursuing self-knowledge. That means we cannot ignore our duty, but at the same time, we cannot ignore self-knowledge. What happens usually is we have two paths. One path is duty, that is, you're doing dharma. That's the highest level for a moksha, for a person in samsara. They're practicing being good, being like a Lao Tzu. If you read the Tao Te Ching, it's all about how to practice in impeccable dharma. But if you're looking for moksha, then you still perform your duty amidst your studies of self-knowledge. So they're together. Actually, in one of the Upanishads, it says that before you learn anything else, first learn who you are. And then you can, do everything else. Why? Because if we learn everything else, we get stuck. Our life it grabs us, and we spend so many years perfecting our craft, perfecting our art. Like you can be a great scientist, a great archaeologist, a great musician, anything, and a great doctor. Just think about a doctor's degree, how many years it takes just to, become, perfect your surgery. So that means that you continue doing what it is that you're doing, but amidst self-knowledge. Okay. So now let's go on to the next section. Okay, now let's talk about two paths. This is going to make it easier for us to understand between this battle between the Pandavas and the Duryodhana and Arjuna, between the good and the bad. They were constantly in battle with. The rishis, rishi means seer. The rishis spent many years contemplating about or objectively witnessing the society. And what the rishis have concluded is, because they were objectively witnessing, they weren't participating in the society, they concluded two paths if they observed every human being. And they concluded and said that every human being is constantly battling or fighting between these two paths every single moment. That means every day you're confronted with either, should I choose path of the pleasant or path of the good? So now let's talk about what path of the pleasant is. Path of the pleasant, I'll give you a little comparison, is guided by the demands of the sense organs. In other words, it's appealing to the senses, like a chocolate or some kind of, a pleasure, emotionally satisfying environment or emotionally satisfying experience. We know that one. Path of the good, guided by the subtle intellect. Okay? Path of the pleasant, there is a temporary joy in the beginning, but sorrow in the ultimate analysis. Path of the good, it is unpleasant in the beginning, but provides permanent happiness later. Path of the pleasant, it's more alluring, and it caters to the extroverted mind. Path of the good, its beauty is hidden. It is perceived by the introverted mind only. Path of the pleasant, it is the path of devolution, regression. Path of the good, it is the path of evolution. Pleasant. Majority of people take this path. We're talking 99.9% of the world, basically. Path of the good. Hardly a few people appreciate and follow this path. Pleasant. It is based on sense gratification. Good. It is based on sound knowledge. Pleasant. All religions repudiate this path. Good. All religions recommend this path to reach the abode of truth. So, that means every day we are confronted by environment, which causes us to either want to participate with this experience or to inquire and ask, is by me participating in this experience going to lead to a peaceful mind, or is it going to lead to an exciting mind? Think about that. Do I want a peaceful mind, or do I want an exciting mind? Exciting mind is what? Path of the pleasant. Because it's seductive, it's tempting, it's alluring, it excites you, and it's just instant gratification. That's what we all like. We'd like to have instant gratification. And guess what? It does provide instant gratification. Meanwhile, path of the good is unpleasant at the start, but it leads to permanent happiness. So that is why it's so hard to stay with this path, because our senses are constantly extroverting us to contact or make contact with the world. Why? Because this contact is essentially pleasing to both the physical, the gross, and the subtle of the parts of the Jeeva. You understand? In other words, it's pleasing for the senses and it's emotionally pleasing, and it's also intellectually pleasing. But we're not talking about worldly intellectual pleasing factors. We're talking about intellectual factors based on identifying or discriminating satya from mithya. And that is not pleasing at the start, but it leads to permanent joy. So that means every moment you have to make this decision. Am I seduced by this, and am I going to say yes, or am I going to say no because I know what my goal is? Remember we talked about goal? My intention. My intention is moksha. Therefore, it's my job to protect my mind, because by every exposure to the outside world, I add another ripple to the mind, subtracting the chance of my inquiring. Okay? So now I talked about the subtle intellect here. Now, we're not talking about intellect of... See, there's two kinds of intellect, and we have to address what this is. I'm talking about intellect here. Now, this intellect has two parts. One of them is called tikshna buddhi, that is gross intellect. And the other part is called sukshma buddhi, that is called the subtle intellect. Tikshna buddhi is used for to resolve worldly matters. For example, to stack bricks together, I need an intellect. I need tikshna buddhi for that. But there's also a more subtle level of that tikshna buddhi, like brain surgery. But it's still what? It's still buddhi, it's still intellect used for the world. We are not talking about exercising that kind of intellect, because we can all exercise that intellect with anything that we do in the world. We are talking about exercising sukshma buddhi, which is a intellect only given to human beings. That means it's a prerogative for human beings, because only we can make use of this intellect to discriminate between satya and mithya. You see? So that means, that is why you can have a scientist who is exercising maximum tikshna buddhi, but will not appreciate sukshma buddhi. In other words, will not appreciate the substratum, will not appreciate matters concerning the religious or the consciousness. They will objectify it, because the intellect isn't sufficient to discern satya from mithya. So it completely misses it, and it objectifies consciousness. Okay? So in this class, we are interested in developing our sukshma buddhi, which is our subjective intellect. And a nice logic for the difference between the two is, let's say we have a beard, and the person wants to shave a beard. Now, gross intellect, tikshna buddhi, would be like a sharp axe. It's an axe and it's sharp. And sukshma buddhi will be like a razor blade. Now, both of them are sharp, but a razor blade is a lot more subtle than the axe. So that means only the razor blade, that is the subtle intellect, can do the job. In other words, can cut the beard. That's what we mean by the difference between the two. Okay. So now we're going to get into the scripture. Any questions so far? Okay, we stopped at number 5 at the bottom. Consciousness. It is not a doer or an enjoyer. If it doesn't do karma, it doesn't do karma, and it can not enjoy the results of actions. Okay, so what does it mean to say it is not a doer or an enjoyer? What does this mean? Consciousness is not a doer or enjoyer. Remember the example last week we used of the steam engine? So look at a body, mind, intellect as the engine. But it's only when the steam comes in or pervades the engine does the engine take on the function for what it's meant for. So that means without the steam, the engine cannot be a steam engine. It is inert, it is dead. So that means only when the steam comes into the engine, only then does the engine actually take on the function for what it's meant for. In the case of the steam engine, the locomotive action. In the case of the body, mind, intellect, only when consciousness pervades your body, that is your faculties of perception, action, your mind, feeling, emotions, and your intellect, thinking and discrimination, does those engines take on the functions for what they're meant for. Understand? So that means without consciousness, no matter how developed your BMI, your body, mind, intellect is, there is nothing to know about it. Just like without the steam, you can have the best engine in the world, but only when steam comes does that engine express the function for what it's made for. Similarly, only when consciousness comes into the body, mind, intellect, that is through the Jeeva, or the 3 bodies, the gross, the subtle, and the causal, does the Jeeva take on the function for what it's built for. So that is why when you wake up, what happens? The world appears. Like you just begin functioning. So that means that without consciousness, your body is as good as lying on the bed, completely unconscious, but only when consciousness comes does that body take on the function for what it's meant for, and the mind and the intellect. So now we see how we have to discriminate between and teach you about who you are as a person, so you can negate these attributes in order to discriminate satya from mithya. Understand? Okay, so that's what it means to say it is not a doer or an enjoyer. Who is the enjoyer?
The Jiva, mind.
That's right. The subtle body, we call it the antakarana, the mind and intellect, because all experiences happen in the subtle body. Okay, so that means, and what is consciousness's purpose? It's to be aware of what? The experience occurring in the antakarana. That means the experience that you're having cannot be known without consciousness. Okay.
Just a question. Just a question about deep sleep.
Yeah.
With consciousness.
Yeah, consciousness is still there in deep sleep. It's just covered in consciousness. In deep sleep, your subtle body, your antakarana, goes into the causal body. That's why you experience bliss in deep sleep. So consciousness is still there. That's why you're able to say about deep sleep, because obviously it implies that you know about deep sleep. It implies that you're still there during deep sleep. So but the only reason we cannot remember our deep sleep is because why? The antakarana, the mind and the intellect, go back into the subtle, into the causal body. So there's no mind and intellect to remember anything, and there is no experience. Therefore, because what do we say? Where experience happens? In the subtle body. Therefore, we say in sleep there's nothing. Why? because the mind and the intellect are absent. So there is nothing to know there. But you're still there as consciousness. That's why you say, I had a great sleep. I slept so well. Yeah. We're going to get to the Mandukya Upanishad soon, and we're going to analyze the deep sleep state. And we're going to negate the waking dream and the deep sleep. Yeah. Okay. The point of the practice of self-knowledge is to gradually see yourself as eternal consciousness and not the body-mind. The body should be regarded as a gift that will be taken away at some time. It should be happily returned to the giver, Ishvara, too. Okay, so the point of the practice of self-knowledge is to gradually see yourself as eternal consciousness and not the body-mind. In other words, if you were to summarize this into 2 steps, number 1, purify the mind. Number 2, obtain self-knowledge. Okay, now a common question comes up is, should then I improve the Jeeva? Because think about it, what as Jivas do, we improve the Jeeva, we want to make the Jeeva better. Now, how does that fit if I am the whole? How do you think that's going to go along with I am the whole, but I'm trying to improve the Jeeva, when the Jeeva is not even yours? Yeah. So the answer to that is one can still improve the Jeeva for the sake of worldly transaction, but the motivation to improve the Jeeva, that disappears, because the Jeeva doesn't belong to you in the first place. It's just another wave in the ocean, no different than another wave. So then why am I associating myself with this wave and not that wave if I'm both of them? You see? So that means if there is still a tendency left over to improve the Jeeva or to make the Jeeva more powerful, to aggrandize the Jeeva, then there is still a confusion of the I am being mixed with the person. Okay?
Wouldn't it be sometimes that your Swadharma requires that you aggrandize the Jiva? So if you're in a position of authority and you are seeking moksha, but you also know you have to manage people or put yourself in a public role, then is that a conflict, or is that which one over to aggrandize? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Just to lift one's status intentionally for the sake of appearing better for the society, because that implies that there is a lack of self-love here. So then I need to ask for validation from other people in order to lift my status due to my own lack of self-love.
But it's possible to be a person of status in a society. And be congruent with...
Absolutely, because Ishvara assigns a different status for every individual, and they're just playing that status because who else is going to play that status? Yeah. So it's actually completely impersonal. You see, if you think about it as yourself as a wave, you were yourself every wave that everyone else was. That means you were both Hitler, you were Mother Teresa, you were JF Kennedy, you were everyone. So everyone sort of takes a turn, right? So it's going to help if you look at creation as impersonal, because Jivas take our Swadharma as very personal. Like, why do I have to do this? Why does not somebody else, get this job? But think about it this way: Ishvara puts everyone here for a reason, and if you don't work out that Swadharma, you cannot move on. So that means we need to start loving exactly what we're doing, because that is the only way we're going to move forward to what we're actually seeking. But we Jivas do not like that due to our own vasanas of our likes and dislikes, and we assign dislike to what we're supposed to be doing, and we don't do what we're supposed to be doing, and then we suffer, and then we call life unfair. So that means no matter how much suffering something seems to be imparting, one still has to go through to play out their Swadharma in order to move on to what they're really seeking, and that is the truth. Yeah, and I know it's not easy because it can be very painful sometimes to, even like in relationships, people stay too long in one out of the fear that they're going to be unloved, so they depend on the other person. But they need to move on because their Swadharma has also changed. So by distancing themselves, that's the only way they're going to move on. Yeah. Okay. The body should be regarded as a gift that will be taken away at some time. Remember in session 2 or 3, I said converting your sense of ownership to trusteeship. That is giving understanding that your body is given to you by Ishvara. And everything you value in life is also given to you by Ishvara. Because we didn't create anything, did we? We don't even know how the sun works. We just come here, offered a body and the whole world. And we get to participate in that. So that means we should be happy to give this body back. But that implies what? You have a choice how you wish to use your body, mind, intellect. You can either expose it to the path of the pleasant or path of the good. It's totally up to you. This is the prerogative of a Jeeva with free will. That means you can go one way or the other. But if your goal is moksha, then you need to be smart about your actions that are conducive with purifying the mind and obtaining self-knowledge. Okay. It should be happily returned to the giver, Ishvara. Just like every wave in the ocean eventually merges back into the wave, so does every body, physical body, mind, and intellect merge back into the ocean of Ishvara. So that means this takes on a different relationship with death. It's no longer something to fear, it's something to gladly look forward to. Okay. Misplaced compassion. This is what Krishna is saying to Arjuna. Misplaced compassion for your suffering or the idea that you might suffer or cause suffering is an unhelpful impulse. It seems as if Arjuna is misguided to fight with his relatives, but it is the right thing for him to do because he or she has been deceitfully injured and he is a soldier. So Gareth, this is related to your question. You see how Arjuna's job, it's not fun to be, now attacking the other army. A lot of blood has to get spilled. But that is what Ishvara has placed Arjuna at. And so Arjuna is being emotional and is refusing to participate, and therefore Arjuna is suffering. If he doesn't rectify the situation, he is basically endorsing adharma, violation of the eternal value of honesty, because Duryodhana will continue to inflict misery on people and Arjuna's reputation will be destroyed, which will cause damage to the society because he is a role model. Just like you're a role model for everyone else. Everyone's looking up to you, whether you know about it or not. If you think about children, they're so observant of their parents. And if you had children, then you probably know what I'm talking about. You know that every move that you make, your child follows it instantly. Human beings are exactly the same. That means your behavior is constantly monitored by others and it influences other people. So this then goes back to our first teaching, be sensitive. Because that what causes it's like a beacon in the ocean of samsara, and the beacon cause or give hope or inspiration to those who are still swimming in the ocean of samsara. Okay, so because he's a role model, Duryodhana is a symbol of the fearful, hard, selfish part of the self. Arjuna is a symbol of the seeker. His loss of reputation is a symbol of a loss of self-esteem that will happen if he does not do what is right. So that means loss of self-esteem equals not following Aswadharma. This goes back to the conversation we've had, and also Kelsey also brought this up, is that if we don't follow Aswadharma, then the result of that usually is in a feeling of guilt. Guilt. It's a big emotional sign that something's wrong. Either I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or I am denying. So that means emotions are extremely good barometers as to whether we're following a Swadharma. Furthermore, Swadharma is known if you ask yourself, one example, would I be doing what I'm doing if I wasn't paid for it? Would I be doing this for free? If it is, then it's likely that you're following your Swadharma. Yes, there is there's an occupation involved, but just for hypothetical reasons, would you be doing it for free? Right. So that means Arjuna is going through a an emotional time and he's looking at this situation and taking it personally versus accepting that that is his swadharma. Okay. Verses 39 to 53. Now this is a new section. So far, I have told you the wisdom of self-knowledge. So up to now, Krishna has revealed to Arjuna that certain information about satya mithya, discrimination, what's the difference between one and the other. But Arjuna still cannot fully appreciate what this knowledge means. And if you relate to that, if usually a seeker will not appreciate, they will be told all there is about consciousness, about who you are, but it's still just surface. It just remains like, oh, that's interesting, it sounds good, but it doesn't, there's no depth there. So Arjuna is having this same problem. So what Krishna did was, just like we're doing in Vedanta, is we always start from the highest. In other words, we always tell you what is our goal. Our goal is moksha and to re-identify the I back from the body-mind back to the original self. That's the goal. So Krishna similarly starts from the highest and then he now is going to go one step less. Starting from the highest. Okay, so Arjuna missed the teaching. I am the doer and needs to do. So that means that the reason Arjuna didn't get this information is because just like a Jeeva, we believe that we are the doer. I am doing, I am speaking, I am listening, I am teaching, I am eating, I am going, I am smiling, I am sleeping. I am thinking, I am confused, I am clear. And all of these adjectives imply what? The I am is the doer. This is our problem, actually. We link the I am consciousness to the doer. And so similarly, Arjuna's I am is linked to Arjuna's swadharma, which is to be a warrior, to be a fighter. So Arjuna, therefore, has a need to do. Why? Because Arjuna believes he is a doer. She is a doer. So how does it make sense now to say, no, you're not a doer? It doesn't. Because whether we say that, you're not going to believe that. You're still going to keep doing. So Krishna therefore devises karma yoga, which means yoga of action. So he prescribes an action yoga to the doer. Why? In order to exhaust the doer that I am doing. Because remember, the doer is also the self-inquirer, the one that inquires the difference between satya and mithya. Even that doer has to go. Because why? That means there's still a person remaining who is what? Apart from the rest, therefore he has to inquire about the whole and the whole. How does that make sense if everything is the whole? So therefore karma's yoga job is to exhaust the doer called the ego. Understand? Okay. Now I will reveal the wisdom of yoga, which will free you from bondage to action. Now, bondage to, we're not talking about freeing you from action. Why? Why are we not talking about freeing you from action? Because you're always acting. You can never not act. Even sleeping is an action. Even doing nothing is an action of doing nothing. In other words, the day this body dies is the day the actor vanishes. That means as long as the body is alive, there will be an actor. So that means that Krishna is talking about the need to think that I need to act. Think about this, what a Jeeva does. I think, I must, I should, I have to. Even though Ishvara is controlling the entire show, the Jiva takes control and thinks that it's the doer, so he takes the responsibility, and therefore the responsibility causes karma back onto the Jiva, and because the Jiva hasn't still identified themselves with the I am, that is consciousness, that means all actions cause the Jiva to take responsibility for what happens and then apply another action to resolve that responsibility, and that produces a reaction causing back the Jiva to deal with that responsibility. And this cycle back and forth never ends. This is called samsara. You see? So what we do is we prescribe an action that exhausts this constant need that I need to act, that I need to do, that I need to study, that I need to learn, that I need to go, that I need to drive, that I need to think in order to survive, that I need to learn in order to gain self-knowledge. In other words, karma yoga causes the jiva to surrender to God, to Ishvara, the one principle which has been animating and moving your mind and every thought from day one. And the jiva never had any control, but the jiva thought it did, so it created a story and then justified, filled in the blanks and made a story out of it and said, here's my life and here's why everything's working for me and here's why, I'm so lucky and here's why I'm unlucky. No, it's because why? Of the past actions, vasanas, which are causing the jiva to act in a way that the jiva does. So now this begs the question, is there free will? Considering the vasanas are causing the causal body, the body that causes the jiva to behave, talk, do, say what the jiva does, that body is constantly shining onto the mechanics of the body, mind, and intellect and making the body, mind, intellect do what it does in the world. And then the jiva says, I am doing what I am doing. And yet even that, even the way the jiva said that is also manipulated or modified by the vasanas. Huh? Free will. Do we really have any free will? Yes and no. We will get to the yes part soon. Remember, in mithya, there's always a yes and a no. If we say yes, we're ignoring the other. So we're back into duality. If we say no, we're ignoring the other. So yes and no. Okay. Bondage to action. So Krishna is not talking about getting rid of action, because that's impossible. The causal body is shining on the vasanas, that is karma is shining on the vasanas, and the vasanas is causing the jiva to do what the jiva does. What Krishna is talking about is the need to think, which compels a jiva to act, which produces further karma, which prevents self-knowledge. Why does it prevent self-knowledge? Because every time I do something, remember, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. For every action that I apply, it causes the world to have a response. And because the jiva thinks it's responsible, that response is now going to come back and the jiva feel compelled to address that response. And when the jiva addresses that response, that's another karma back into the world, which causes another requirement to come back, and then the jiva will feel obligated to cover that response too. So it's a constant back and forth. Okay.
You mentioned Lao Tzu before.
Yeah.
Have you heard the idea of Wu Wei?
Yeah.
Wu Wei, actionless action in the Taoist.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking when I'm hearing it, it sounds similar.
Gateless gate, pathless path.
Yeah, it seems similar of no action, but it's just the drive to achieve, the drive to.
Yeah, it's a surrender to Ishvara. So it appears on the outside like something's being done, and it appears like the person's busy, but it's a total surrender to Ishvara. So Ishvara is fully, coordinating and moving the individual, and the individual is standing back and witnessing. So the jiva stands back and he says, "No, I'm in control." So he constantly gets in its own way, and it hinders or slows down the path of the jiva. So it's the same thing. We just look at it from a different angle. Yeah, Wu Wei. Okay. In this yoga, no effort is wasted and no unwanted results produced. That's kind of cool, isn't it? So for every action, you see, we're always worried, is this actually going to be a fruitful action? And is this going to produce some kind of benefit for me? Well, karma yoga benefit is no action is wasted and no unwanted results produced. And we can kind of discern why this is, because we just talked about using action, which you're always doing anyway, to constantly think or place your mind on the Lord, onto Ishvara. And as long as that's done, each time it purifies the mind. And it pleases the Lord, because the Lord is always asking you, give back to me, because I, Ishvara too, have given you everything in life. So how does it make sense to keep asking for more? You see how greedy that is? That's what Jivas do. We get everything. Every breath is given to us by Ishvara. All of our loved family and cars and knowledge and Vedanta, all of this is given by Ishvara, and yet we keep asking for more. So that means Karma Yoga is an attitude of giving versus extracting. And this converts the mind from noisy or ripples into tranquil and quiet. Okay.
Excuse me, sorry, is that a toilet?
Yeah, sure, it's just at the back. Even very little of this yoga removes great fear. Okay, now what Krishna is talking about, great fear, is the fear of not getting what I want. That's what fear is. Not getting what I want. That's what causes anxiety. It's actually future thinking. So Arjuna is now thinking, I'm not going to get what I want, because obviously I don't want us to fight, and I'm afraid how the battle is going to turn out. So Krishna is reassuring Arjuna that this yoga is going to remove your fear, which is actually entwined with desire. Remember what we said about fear, desire? Desire is a positive fear, and fear is a negative desire. They're always together. So that's the benefit of karma yoga. Okay. Concerning liberation, enlightenment, there is one well ascertained understanding. But among the undiscriminating, there are innumerable erroneous notions. Undiscriminating people, full of desires and addicted to action, get lost in rituals, in the belief that pleasure and power and superior births are the highest attainments. Okay. Concerning liberation, there is one well ascertained understanding. What is that understanding? That the problem is ignorance. Ignorance of what? Jeeva, Jagat, Ishvara. Jeeva, you as a person, Jagat, the world, that's Ishvara 2, and Ishvara is Ishvara 1, the self. That subsumes the word ignorance. Is there anything else? Is there any other category other than you as a person, the world, and consciousness? Yeah. So that means every Vedanta school, if you go to different schools, will talk about these three, Jeeva, Jagat, and Ishvara. And our job is to educate you about the Jeeva, Jagat, and Ishvara, so that you can then not overlap or superimpose who you are not onto who you are. It's called superimposition. We're going to get into superimposition now. Okay, so and the discriminating between satya and mithya is called moksha. Satya and mithya. But among the undiscriminating, that is samsaris, there are innumerable erroneous notions. Notions like, enlightenment is experiential bliss. You got to stop your mind. You got to destroy all the vasanas. You got to raise your kundalini. You've got to, go to Amazon and get yourself high on ayahuasca or something. There's so many erroneous emotions fly around the spiritual world. And so in other words, they're fantasies born out of ignorance, basically. That's where these erroneous notions come from. Undiscriminating people, full of desires and addicted to action, get lost in rituals in the belief that pleasure and power are superior births and are the highest attainments. Okay, now, let's analyze the word rituals. What do we mean by this? Rituals has two connotations. I'll give you the first one. The first one is if we were to ask what is the purpose of rituals, even karma yoga is a ritual. The practice of rituals, karma kanda, that's the first portion of the Vedas, makes the mind single-pointed when it is pursued without specific desires. Such a prepared mind alone is fit for steady contemplation over the Upanishadic declarations. That's what the purpose of rituals is, to single-pointedly focus the mind so that the mind is trained and you can then focus on discriminating satya from mithya. Now, in the context of this sentence, people full of desires and addicted to get lost in rituals, we're talking about a second kind of ritual, and that is the 100% of people's efforts in the spiritual world and normal samsadis will put their effort and reinforce mithya. Basically, they stem from lack and are concerned with giving Jeeva something more of. That's what a ritual means in the context of the sentence. Even dating is a ritual. It's courting a person. It's a ritual for what? To get something. A ritual to start a business. It's a ritual to what? Get money. A ritual to go to the exercise gym. It's a ritual for what? To improve the shape of the body. A ritual to go to a memory course and improve the memory. It's a ritual to what? Have a better memory. In other words, samsadis get lost in these rituals because they're so fascinating. Okay. And so rituals do produce a better life, no doubt. We can all agree with that. And they gain us worldly things. But there's no ritual you can do to get enlightened. No ritual you can do to get enlightened. Why? Because you are already free. You are already free. The steam is free from the engine. So, and every ritual is limited. So how can it produce limitlessness? So here's a question. Let's take a Jeeva that is ignorant of their nature. Is the Jeeva limited or limitless? Is the Jeeva limited or limitless? Limited. Otherwise, why would the Jeeva be seeking for moksha? That implies the Jeeva feels limited and they're looking for something to remove that limitation from their sense of limitation, to remove the limitation. So now, question, how can a Jeeva who is limited, okay, I'm going to ask it in a different way. Can a limited Jeeva perform a limitless action? Can a limited Jeeva perform a limitless action? Considering the Jeeva is limited, implying what? All of the Jeeva's actions will be also limited. So the question is, can a limited Jeeva looking for moksha perform a ritual that's going to cause the Jeeva to merge with the limitlessness? No way. So then, how can a ritual from the state of ignorance cause moksha? How can it? It can't. Because the one that's performing the ritual is limited. And every action they're doing in mithya is limited in itself. Why? Because it's dualistic. So that means if I perform a certain meditation, what about a meditation that's twice deeper than the one that I'm having? In other words, there's always more in every ritual when it comes time for mithya. You understand? So now, hence ignorance of self is not an action problem. In other words, lack of the right ritual, like give me a proper pranayama, give me a super mega meditation, give me a vipassana that's twice effective. It is not the problem of action, it is a problem of knowledge. In fact, action is motivated by ignorance. Think about this statement. Why are we learning? Why do we learn the scriptures? Does that not imply that we're ignorant? Yeah. So that means our action is motivated and giving away, I don't know. So therefore, I'm motivated to know. Okay. I'll give you a metaphor of this example because it's a very important statement. There was a father and a son on a desert, and they were walking and they were very tired. And the son and both the father saw an oasis in the distance on the desert. You know, when the certain conditions of the environment and the sun is, you know, shining down, and then the clouds are blue, and it causes in the distance for us to see blue on the surface of the sand, meaning what? There's water there. So what does the sun do? The sun runs because the sun sees water. But what does the father do? Stays put. He doesn't move. So now, why? What's the difference? The sun doesn't know about the fact that this is just a mirage. In other words, it's a superimposition on top of the substratum called adhyasthana, which has caused what it actually is not to appear on top of what? The sand. In other words, by the circumstances that Maya has created, it has what? Taken the substratum, the sand, and superimposed the cloud onto the sand, and then the sun, not having knowledge of this circumstance, runs. In other words, the sun's action is motivated by what? Ignorance. But why does the father stay put? The father is an enlightened person. Why does the father also see the oasis? Because Maya continues. It doesn't mean that once moksha once you realize the self, it doesn't mean that the world disappears. The world continues just like it did for everyone else. The only thing that changes is the status of the world is known to be what? That oasis in the distance. Not real. It's just a superimposition. In other words, the only thing that changes for one with self-realized person is what? The status of the world. That's it. The status of the world. Before, they were what? Participating into the world due to their ignorance, motivated by ignorance, so they were participating in the world. Now they know it's just a mirage, so they stay put. And therefore what? They're just happy with themselves alone. You see the difference? Okay. So now, I'm going to show us this statement with another example using a typical, an important analogy of the snake and the rope, which is often used in Vedanta. And we're going to use this snake rope example more often to remove the superimposition of the mithya over satya, or in other words, the body, mind, intellect over consciousness. Okay, so you guys know the snake rope example? Okay, well, I'm going to reiterate it. So, once a young man was walking nearby a village, and the village had a certain path. It had an entrance to the village, and near the entrance was a well. So the young man thought he wanted to slake his thirst. So he came over to the well and he reached over to the bucket. And just as his hand was so close to the bucket, he, in the twilight, noticed a curling cobra rearing up. And the young man froze in paralysis, thinking the poisonous snake is going to strike any moment. So the young man could neither retreat nor advance, knowing that no matter what movement he makes, the snake is going to bite. And as fate would have it, an old man called Mr. Vedanta with a white beard happens to be walking by and notices the young man's widened eyes and trembling body and perspiration, and obviously the young man is in distress, so the old man thought he walks over to the young man and asks him, "What's troubling you, sir?" And the young man, hardly daring to speak, whispers and opportunes the old man to grab a stick nearby to kill the poisonous snake. So the old man thought he just walks over and sizes up the situation to see really what's the big deal. And he bursts in a hearty chuckle and explains to the young man that it is actually not a snake that appears to the young man, it is actually a rope. So then the young man looks again and goes, oh my God, it's a rope. How could I have made such a mistake? Okay, so that's the story of the snake rope example. Now, here's a question. Let's say the old man did not come. Okay, we're going to change the story. Let's say the old man didn't come. Would killing the snake eliminate the snake? Because that's an action. Killing the snake is an action. Would that kill the snake? No. Why not? Because the problem is not action. It's a superimposition. For the man or the woman that's standing there, that snake is absolutely real. So that means no matter what they do, that superimposition still continues. Now think about what this means for a Jeeva. That means the entire world is just a superimposition onto the substratum, and then we're what? Participating in the world, thinking it's real and making a big deal out of it. And guess what? The young man had a genuine, authentic emotional response to something that did not even exist, the snake. He was genuinely fearful, genuinely trembling, genuinely, scared. But was the snake really there? No. So that means the superimposition causes one to experience a genuine response to what's being projected. So that means only when did the old man come over and reveal what it actually is not, did the superimposition vanish away. Okay, so now let's investigate this with a few more examples. So the apparent snake has been removed by knowledge of pointing out what reality is not. Now think about this. Why does it point out in a negative? It doesn't point out in a positive. It points out what it's actually not. See, we don't have to tell you your consciousness, your existence. That's self-evident to you. We have to point out what you are not. Similarly, the old man points out that it's not a snake instead of saying it's a rope. You see? So that's what superimposition is. By affirming what it is with knowledge, Vedanta, or whatever means of knowledge it is, it removes the superimposition. Therefore, the problem with ignorance is not a lack of the right action, it is simply a lack of the right knowledge. Okay. The misapprehension of the true nature of the situation is okay. So that's what the young man is experiencing, a misapprehension of the true nature of the situation. Hence, suffering is due to this superimposition onto reality, onto the rope. Now, the traveler's fear wasn't removed by killing the snake, but by gaining knowledge, because there was no snake to begin with in the first place. So that means all of the action that I've invested, it went in total vain. It was just a waste of time, because I was trying to fix something that was just a superimposition. I was trying to appeal to the snake. I was trying to make the snake go away, but the snake wasn't there in the first place. So what does this mean? What's the conclusion? Knowledge is the key. But then why do we have karma yoga if karma yoga is for action? How does that fit in now? What do we say what karma yoga does? Purifies the mind. So that would be equivalent to if that young man at the well did not have a pure mind and the old man says it's not a snake, then the young man would look again and would say, no, it is a snake. No, it's not, it is a snake. So karma yoga purifies the mind so you can actually understand what we're talking about. Okay. Traveler didn't have to die or have an ego death to eliminate the snake like we've had in the spiritual world. You gotta destroy your ego. You gotta die. No, he didn't. He just had to be revealed what reality is not. This is called adhyasa, superimposition. And traveler didn't have to merge with the snake in some cosmic orgasm like you have with rising your kundalini and, you know, blowing up into some amazing experience. He just had to be revealed what reality, which he thought was, is actually not. Okay. So now I'm going to read us a section. Any questions so far? Okay. This comes from Shankaracharya's preamble, Bhashyam on the Brahma Sutras, and it's a preparation to understand the Brahma Sutras. So I'm just going to read one page from this book that's going to just talk a little bit more about what superimposition is, because we're going to get deeper into superimposition throughout the course in order to understand the superimposition. Why? In order to remove the superimposition. Okay. Vedanta, the remedy for adhyasa, superimposition. After thus demonstrating the adhyasa lies at the root of all human transactions, secular as well as Vedic, in other words, including in spirituality, adhyasa is also present. The Acharya, the teacher, reiterates the definition of superimposition as atasmim stad buddhihi, meaning cognition of one thing in what is not that thing. Think about that. Cognition of what? The snake. I've cognized the snake, I've comprehended the snake, but it's actually what? It says here, is not that thing. I've cognized one thing, but it's not that thing which I've cognized. It's actually something else. That's superimposition. And goes on to bring our attention the exact objects of mutual superimposition. He provides 5 instances of superimposition. The first 4, that's not important. He provides 5 instances of superimposition. Superimposition of the attributes of external objects, like my wife, my son, my child, my parent. The second is superimposition of the attributes of the body, like fatness, thinness, cadaverous. Superimposition of the attributes of the senses, dumbness, deafness. And superimposition of the attributes of the internal organs, like desire, resolve, and also the pranas, all of your digestion and circulation. And superimposition of the body, senses, and internal organs, and so on, onto the self. In other words, the 5 kinds of superimpositions that are superimposed over the self. And so this concludes, then why do we mistake I am with this body, mind, and intellect? Well, we have 5 kinds of superimpositions, and we need to remove every one of them. All these illustrations effectively drive home the point that mutual superimposition of the self and not self lies at the heart of all human sufferings. He concludes by declaring that it is to end this natural beginningless superimposition that the Upanishads have been commenced. In other words, that the Upanishads reveal. All right. So, next week we will continue with superimposition and the rest of this statement, and we're just going to carry on into free will. We will talk about where do we really have free will, where is that yes part of the free will, and more about Ishvara being the author of the actions and not the Jeeva. In other words, causing or letting us to surrender to Ishvara too. Because the only reason we refuse to surrender to God is because we think that what we have to take care of our own lives, and we don't understand Ishvara, that it's taking care of us all the time. Think about yourself, you're still here alive. Okay, let's close. Let's do it together. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. And I see, will this response, am I acknowledging them, or is this response about, defending myself? So in other words, it's once again mindful. It's deliberate response versus automatic. So this trains one to exercise their compassion and their sensitivity towards the other. It doesn't matter if the other is wrong. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's still an opportunity for me to exercise, to grow spiritually, to evolve as a character. So there's no better thing than using worldly normal transactions to refine. It's like this. Imagine life is like a rough grindstone, for sharpening a knife. Now, rough grindstone is rough. So we can just generally subsume that life is rough. Not necessarily, but we can say life is rough. It's a rough grindstone. And your body, mind, and intellect, your instrument is the knife. So now, what happens if you don't know how to use or apply the knife onto the grindstone? What happens? You end up blunting the knife. You end up blunting your intellect, your emotions, and your body. But now let's say we get educated, we educate the knife, our instrument, and then what happens? We know how to position it and make contact with the world in such a way that despite life being rough, we use that to our advantage to sharpen our body, mind, intellect, versus being a victim of the roughness of life. In other words, roughness of life now turns out to our advantage because why? We know how to apply this onto life in a form of right contact. So that's the metaphor. And Karma Yoga is using the grindstone, life, rough, and the body, mind, instrument, making contact in such a way that no matter what you do, you're always sharpening your instrument. Yeah.
I guess my thing has been what happens when you stuff up, when you do say the wrong thing and all that. And
cool,
I don't
that's
really
easy.
have any kind of way of doing it other than just sort of forgive myself, or it's not even that heavy. It's just like, I missed out that
right.
time. I didn't handle that very well.
Yeah.
But it does, I think, tend to once you get into spirituality, you make a judgment about, if you're not informed, I suppose, you
right.
start to get judgmental about your own actions,
yeah.
not being pure enough, or
right.
I don't really know how to phrase it, but there's a sort of internal dialogue that goes,
yeah, I understand.
So
yeah.
I guess I'm new to Karma Yoga, but one thing that I recognise from just watching this video was, okay, even when you do stuff up, that's okay too.
It is.
It's obviously
because it's part of life.
Yeah. But you've got to make your own assessment of what you did wrong, and then just forget about the regret or the self-recrimination, and just get back to it.
Yeah, you just stand up and just continue.
I've heard it put that when you do sort of get off track, in a sense, it gives you that opportunity that sort of sweet moment to revisit back of who you really are again. And you get a little bit of joy from that oh yes, that's right, this presence and the ability to then make the right choice again, or you sort of become unconscious in a situation.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an opportunity, huh?
An opportunity to get that little sweet moment then to be give back.
I find that comes from reading something rather than I get an automatic kind of, I'm back in, back in awareness or something. I find it inspirational from reading. Okay, I remember now. I remember this. I remember that sort of impulse to, But it's if you're sort of an overly thinking person,
I understand. I was like that too. A lot of head in the head and trying to analyze everything.
And I think most people mistake spirituality as being this pure path where you just gotta be there, man, do the right thing and all that sort of
when
stuff.
it's actually nothing to do with that.
I know, but it's a big misapprehension about what it is.
Just being human, actually.
That's right. And
ordinary.
Take your opportunity to learn, not to gain knowledge. That's really what it is. But anyway.
Yeah, good point. And it's just practice, like with anything. And yeah, it's not easy at the start, because life is always testing us in a way. So every like with the knife and grindstone, every time we have an opportunity to reflect, what could have I done better, and how will I optimize or improve next time. And so this once again places the attention inwards versus outwards, and that's the whole point of this practice, to go inwards.
Yeah, if you've got a vasana of, even though it's self-defined or self-diagnosed, self-sabotage or just, that's obviously what Karma Yoga is going to help you with.
Yes, I've just covered a small section of Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is going to help a lot, because the other part of Karma Yoga is offering all the results of your actions to Ishvara, because you're not responsible. Yeah. See, the ocean is moving every wave, and so ultimately there's really little control that the Jeeva has over which way it goes. It does have control, because the waves affect the ocean, but the oceans affect the waves simultaneously, and they're in the same order of reality anyway. So that means you affect God as a Jeeva, and God affects you simultaneously, because it's the same mithya reality. So that's where free will comes. And and Karma Yoga is also about releasing that back to Ishvara, because if you could have done better, you would have. But obviously there's something that compels us to let it through anyway, and then we regret it, but you just have to understand that actually I could have not done any better. But the fact that I did, and I'm able to let go, that alone is able to purify the vasana. If I take responsibility and blame myself, then that just reinforces the vasana, and then there's a compulsion to act it out next time, because I'll be now compelled to perform an action in response to this negative situation, which implies that this negative situation I had control in the first place, but I didn't. Because the world is totally out of our hands. Look at it, for example, this way. You go to a party, right? And we think we're in control of the party, how we play. But look at it this way. The weather alone is going to determine what kind of conversations I have. How people are dressed, if they're all sexy or just, long suits, that alone is going to affect how my behavior is with people. The kind of food that I eat is going to affect how my conversations play out. Whether there's wind is going to change whether I hang out outside or indoor. So many factors are playing at the same time, and we think, I'm totally in control. So by understanding there are variables that are totally out of our control, we're able to relieve and forgive our mistakes, because we're not the authors. We're not the authors of the entire creation.